On the night of December 4, 1971, in the vast deserts of Rajasthan, a battle unfolded that would go down in history as one of the most remarkable acts of courage in modern warfare. Today, we take you through the legendary Battle of Longewala, where a small contingent of Indian soldiers faced overwhelming Pakistani forces during the 1971 Indo-Pak War and emerged victorious against all odds. This story is not just about tanks, guns, and strategy. It is about bravery, leadership, and determination, whether you are a history enthusiast or a student of military tactics. The Battle of Longewala offers lessons in courage and resilience that continue to inspire generations. The year 1971 was a turning point in South Asian history. The conflict between India and Pakistan escalated over the situation in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Political unrest, humanitarian crises, and the demand for independence led to heightened tensions on both the eastern and western fronts. While the Indian military was largely focused on supporting liberation forces in East Pakistan, the western front along Rajasthan and Punjab was also strategically important. Pakistani forces planned to launch offensives across the western border, aiming to divert Indian attention and capture territory. Longewala, a small border post in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan, became a key target in Pakistan's strategy. Despite being a remote outpost, the location held immense strategic value. Capturing it would have allowed Pakistani forces to penetrate deeper into Indian territory. Longewala was lightly defended but strategically positioned to guard the Indian frontier. The outpost was manned by around 120 Indian soldiers, mostly from the 23rd Battalion of the Punjab Regiment, along with a few personnel from the Border Security Force (BSF). Their weapons included light mortar, machine guns, and a handful of rifles, barely enough to match the firepower of an advancing brigade. On the other side, the Pakistani attack force was formidable. It consisted of 2 infantry brigades, approximately 2,000 to 3,000 troops, and around 40 tanks, supported by artillery and armored vehicles. The Pakistani plan was clear: overwhelm the Indian defenders quickly, capture Longewala, and continue their advance into Rajasthan, potentially threatening major towns like Jaisalmer. As darkness fell, Pakistani tanks and troops moved silently across the desert, ready to strike at the outpost. Facing the approaching threat, the Indian commander Major Kuldip Singh Chandpuri made a crucial decision to hold the ground at all costs rather than retreat. This decision would define the battle and cement his place in history. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the defenders prepared quickly. They took positions behind sand dunes, laid improvised minefields, and used every tactical advantage the terrain offered. The Indian soldiers knew that survival depended not on brute force, but on clever strategy, discipline, and endurance. The Pakistani attack commenced late at night. The desert reverberated with the sound of tank engines, artillery fire, and gunshots. Pakistani forces attempted to crush the defenders with sheer numbers and heavy firepower, but the small Indian team held firm. Every inch of ground was defended with precision and courage. For hours, the Indian soldiers held their positions against the relentless Pakistani assault. The defenders faced severe challenges: tanks moving in close, limited ammunition, and the risk of being overrun. However, their training, morale, and leadership kept them focused. Major Chandpuri coordinated defensive fire, targeting enemy vehicles and personnel systematically. Indian soldiers used anti-tank weapons, mortars, and machine guns to slow the advancing enemy. Though their numbers were small, their discipline and tactical knowledge gave them an edge over the uncoordinated night assault. By dawn, the battle had reached a critical point. The Indian defenders had withstood the night-long attack, but the Pakistani forces were still a threat. It was at this moment that the Indian Air Force intervened, changing the course of the battle. At first light, Indian fighter aircraft, including Hawker hunters, struck the Pakistani columns. Tanks and vehicles were destroyed or immobilized, causing confusion and panic among the attackers. The combination of ground resistance and air support proved decisive. The Pakistani forces, unable to continue their advance and facing heavy losses, were forced to retreat in disarray. Numerous tanks and vehicles were abandoned in the desert, some burned, some immobilized by mines. The small Indian contingent had successfully repelled a much larger force, an extraordinary achievement in military history. The human cost of the battle was tragic but skewed heavily toward the attacking side. Indian losses were minimal. Only a few soldiers were killed, though several were wounded. Pakistani casualties were significantly higher, with over 200 soldiers killed, dozens of tanks destroyed, and many vehicles abandoned. The battle's outcome had strategic implications beyond the battlefield. By halting the Pakistani advance, Indian forces stabilized the western front, allowing the Indian military to focus resources on other critical areas, including the Eastern Theater, which eventually led to the liberation of Bangladesh. Major Kuldip Singh Chandpuri's leadership during Longewala became legendary. His courage, calm under fire, and tactical insight allowed a small group of men to defend against overwhelming odds. For his valor, he was awarded the Mahavir Chakra, one of India's highest military honors. The soldiers at Longewala became symbols of resilience and patriotism. Their actions inspired generations and were immortalized in literature, documentaries, and films. including the popular 1997 Bollywood movie Border, which dramatized the events of the battle. The Battle of Longewala is studied not just for its military tactics but for human courage and leadership under pressure. A few key lessons emerge. Leadership matters. Major Chandpuri's decisions were pivotal. Courage under fire. Small forces can resist larger armies with strategy and morale. Integration of air and ground forces, combined operations turned the tide of the battle. Terrain advantage. Knowledge of the desert terrain allowed Indian forces to set effective defensive positions. Longewala reminds us that even in modern warfare, courage, strategy, and determination can outweigh numbers and firepower. The Battle of Longewala remains one of the most iconic chapters of the 1971 Indo-Pak War. It highlights how a small, determined force, guided by courage and leadership, can achieve extraordinary results against overwhelming odds. The bravery displayed at Longewala continues to inspire not only the Indian military but people around the world. Memorials, history books, documentaries, and films ensure that the story of this battle remains alive for future generations. In remembering Longewala, we celebrate heroism, resilience, and the spirit of defending one's nation. It stands as a powerful example of how determination, courage, and leadership can define the course of history. Thank you for watching this detailed account of the Battle of Longewala. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe for more history and military stories. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep learning from the past.